Wealthy alien girl dresses as a beggar to test kindness. Only a human treats the alien girl right. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Madeline was no stranger to wealth, born into the illustrious bloodlines of the Tan Dominion. Her home was a mansion unlike any other, nestled in the grandest corner of her home planet. Her family's name commanded respect across 17 star systems, and Madeline's life was filled with luxuries most could only dream of. Yet, despite all the wealth and privilege, she had always felt a hollow emptiness inside. It was not until she learned about the kindness of humans that she started questioning the values she had grown up with. Humans, in their simplicity, had something more valuable than any precious gem or starship: kindness. In a moment of rebellion against her upbringing, Madeline decided to test this idea. She would disguise herself as a beggar, far from the luxurious attire she was used to. With a simple cloak, some dirt, and a few marks on her face, she became an unrecognizable figure in the crowd. Her plan was simple. She would sit in the bustling streets of Earth, surrounded by the everyday hustle and bustle, and see who would truly offer her help. As she settled onto the cold sidewalk, the first few hours were full of discomfort. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. The streets were filled with busy passers-by, yet none seemed to notice her. She had always been the center of attention, always treated with the respect her name demanded. But here, in this unkempt form, she was invisible, a mere speck in the crowd. Hours passed, and still, no one stopped to offer her help. The few who glanced at her hurried on, uninterested in a poor beggar, unwilling to spare a moment for someone in need. Yet, she felt the sting of disappointment not just from being ignored, but from the growing realization that perhaps the kindness she had heard of was just a myth. That was until he came. Ethan Carter was no stranger to hardship. He worked long hours as a barista in a small cafe, barely making ends meet, but always keeping a warm smile for his customers. He had learned early in life that the little things mattered the most, and so, when he saw the young woman sitting on the cold sidewalk, he couldn't help but feel a tug at his heart. He had seen many beggars, heard many stories of people in need, but something about her stood out. She wasn't just asking for money. She looked lost. Ethan approached cautiously, not knowing who she truly was. He sat beside her, offering a simple, "Are you okay?" Madeline looked up at him, startled by his approach. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity, just genuine concern. It was more than she had ever expected from someone, especially a human. I just need a little help," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan nodded, pulling out the last few bills he had in his pocket. "Here, take this," he said, handing them over. "But if you need more, come inside the cafe. I'll get you something warm." Madeline stared at the money in her hand. She had expected more rejection, more indifference. Instead, here was a human who treated her as if she were more than just a beggar. She took a deep breath, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She had expected nothing, but now, she felt as though she had been given something far more precious than money: dignity. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan smiled at her. "No problem. You're not alone." He stood, offering her a hand. As she took it and rose to her feet, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just kindness. It was a reminder of what truly mattered. No matter the circumstances, this man had shown her what it meant to treat others right, without judgment, without hesitation. Madeline couldn't help but wonder if this one act of kindness could change the course of her life. As she followed Ethan to the cafe, she knew that her journey had only just begun. As Madeline followed Ethan into the cafe, she was overwhelmed by a strange mix of emotions. She had expected a quick transaction, a simple handout from a passerby, but instead, she found herself in the warmth of a small, cozy cafe, a place where she had never imagined herself to be. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the soft murmur of conversation surrounded them, giving the place a comforting, familiar vibe. Ethan led her to a corner booth and gestured for her to sit. Madeline hesitated for a moment, still not fully able to shake the feelings of being an outsider. But as she slid into the seat, Ethan smiled at her warmly, the kindness in his eyes unwavering. "I'll get you something hot to drink. You must be freezing out there," he said, his voice soft and genuine. Madeline watched him as he went to the counter, still processing everything that had happened. Here was a man who had no reason to help her, no obligation to show her such kindness. Yet he did. It was baffling to her, this simple, selfless act. She wasn't used to this kind of treatment. Back home, people showed respect because of status, because of wealth. But Ethan wasn't doing this because of who she was or what she had. He was doing it simply because he cared. She felt her heart swell with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't expected to feel. Ethan returned a moment later with a steaming cup of cocoa and a warm smile. "Here you go," he said, setting the cup in front of her. "You can drink it slowly. I've got time if you need to talk." Madeline took the cup, her hands wrapping around it for warmth. She looked at him, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan nodded, sitting down across from her. "No need to thank me. It's just what you do when you see someone in need." Madeline's mind raced as she tried to process his words. She had been raised in a world where kindness was often transactional, where it was given with an expectation of something in return. But Ethan's actions didn't fit that mold. She could see that now. There was no hidden agenda in his kindness, no ulterior motive. And yet, as she sat there, she found herself struggling with something else. The realization that this human, this stranger, had treated her with more respect and dignity than anyone in her entire life. She wasn't used to feeling vulnerable, but in that moment, she felt both exposed and safe. She took a sip of the cocoa, letting the warmth spread through her. "You're not like the others," she said quietly, still trying to come to terms with the kindness he had shown. "Most people would have just walked past me." Ethan smiled softly, his eyes full of understanding. "Not everyone is like that. You'd be surprised." Madeline looked at him, feeling an overwhelming sense of confusion. She was supposed to be in control, to hold the power in situations like this. But here she was, vulnerable and uncertain, in a way she had never been before. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Ethan leaned back in his seat, his gaze steady. "Because everyone deserves kindness, no matter who they are or where they come from." His words hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. Madeline looked down at the cup in her hands, feeling a deep shift within her. She had come to Earth to test the kindness of humans, to see if they were truly capable of anything beyond self-interest. But in Ethan's simple act of giving, she had found something far more meaningful than she had expected. She had found something that, until that moment, she hadn't realized she had been searching for, a reminder of what it meant to truly care for someone without expecting anything in return. And for the first time in a long while, Madeline felt a glimmer of hope. She hadn't just found kindness. She had found a reflection of humanity's greatest gift, compassion. That evening, as they shared a quiet conversation over drinks, Madeline realized that this encounter, so simple yet so profound, would change the way she saw the world. For the first time, she didn't feel like a stranger in a foreign land. She felt, for once, like she belonged. As the days passed, Madeline found herself drawn back to the small cafe again and again. Ethan's kindness had become a beacon in the midst of her complicated, lonely existence. She continued to visit, always under the guise of being a stranger, just another person in the city. But each time, something inside her shifted. With each cup of cocoa, each shared smile, she began to see the world through a different lens, one that wasn't defined by wealth or status. Ethan never asked her about her past, and yet, he treated her with a respect and understanding that no one else had ever offered. It was as if he could see her for who she truly was, not for the alien queen she was born to be, but for the person she was slowly becoming. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of running errands, Madeline found herself standing outside the cafe, hesitating. She had grown used to their quiet exchanges, but she had yet to reveal the full truth of who she was. Her status, her family, all of it still hung over her like an invisible weight. As she stood there, staring at the door, She couldn't help but wonder if Ethan would still treat her the same once he knew the truth. But something inside her told her that this was a test she had to face, not for him, but for herself. She pushed open the door and walked inside, her heart racing. Ethan was behind the counter, as usual, his back to her as he prepared drinks. He didn't hear her approach, and for a brief moment, she simply watched him, taking in the way his movements were so effortless, so calm. He seemed so real. "Hey, Ethan," she called softly, her voice uncertain. He turned, his eyes lighting up as he saw her. "Madeline, hey, you came back." There was no hint of surprise, no question about why she had returned. It was as if it had always been expected. She gave him a tentative smile, still unsure of how to begin. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan raised an eyebrow, concerned. "Of course, take a seat. What's on your mind?" Madeline slid into her usual spot at the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. "I haven't been completely honest with you," she began, the words feeling heavy in her mouth. Ethan didn't interrupt, but his expression softened, as if he had been waiting for her to say this all along. I'm not who you think I am." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm from a different planet. I come from a family that rules over multiple star systems. I'm not just some girl you met on the street. She stopped herself, realizing how absurd it all sounded. Ethan blinked, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he smiled. "You're Madeline. That's all I know. And that's enough for me." His words were simple, but they cut through the weight she had carried for so long. "What you told me doesn't change anything," he continued, his voice steady. "You're still the same person." Madeline looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "But I lied to you," she said. "I'm not some ordinary person. I'm a queen. I've never had to live like this before, to be human." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his gaze gentle. "You don't need to apologize for that. We all have our pasts. What matters is what we choose to do in the present." His words hit her like a wave, washing away the tension she had been holding onto for so long. She realized, in that moment, that she had been searching for something her entire life, something that had never been about power or wealth. It had always been about connection. And in Ethan, she had found it. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't out of sadness. It was out of relief. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being judged. She was just being seen for who she was. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan smiled warmly, reaching across the counter to gently squeeze her hand. "You don't have to thank me. Just be yourself." Madeline looked at him, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. In that moment, she realized that Ethan had given her something priceless. The freedom to be who she truly was, without fear, without judgment. And that was all she had ever needed. As the weeks passed, Madeline found herself spending more time with Ethan. Each day brought a new layer to their friendship, a connection that grew stronger with every conversation, every shared moment. They would meet at the cafe every afternoon, where Ethan would prepare her favorite cocoa, and they would talk for hours about anything and everything. At first, Madeline had hesitated to open up fully, but now, the walls she had built around herself were slowly crumbling. Ethan had a way of making her feel at ease, of making her forget that she wasn't just a woman from another world. She was simply Madeline, a person with hopes, dreams, and fears like anyone else. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the city, Madeline stood outside the cafe, waiting for Ethan to close up. She watched as he wiped down the counter, a small smile playing on his lips as he hummed a soft tune to himself. There was something so comforting about his presence, something that made her feel like she had finally found a place where she belonged. "I think the world needs more people like you," she said, stepping up to the door. Ethan paused, looking up at her with a curious expression. "What do you mean?" he asked, locking the door behind him and turning to face her. Madeline smiled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You make people feel like they matter, like they're not just a passing face in the crowd." Ethan chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm just doing my job, trying to make the world a little better, one cup at a time." "It's more than that," Madeline replied, her voice sincere. "You've changed the way I see the world. And I think you've given me something I didn't even know I needed." Ethan tilted his head, his expression softening. "And what's that?" Hope, Madeline whispered. Hope that there's more to life than power and wealth, more to relationships than status and expectations. You've shown me that kindness is what really matters. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers with a depth of understanding. Kindness is the only thing that really lasts, he said softly. Madeline felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was playing a role, pretending to be someone she wasn't. She didn't need to be the queen of a vast empire. She didn't need to wear the facade of royalty. All she needed was to be herself, and in Ethan's eyes, she could see that she was enough. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. She had spent so much of her life hiding behind a mask, pretending to be someone she wasn't in order to protect herself from the world. But, in Ethan's presence, she felt like she could finally let go of all the pretense. She could just be Madeline, the woman who had found something far more valuable than all the wealth and power she had ever known. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, I don't know how to thank you for everything. You've made me believe in something I thought I had lost forever. Ethan smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Madeline's heart flutter. You don't have to thank me. Just keep being you. As they stood there, the city bustling around them, Madeline realized that she had found something more precious than she could ever have imagined. It wasn't just love, though she could feel that too. It was the freedom to be herself, to live without fear, to find someone who saw her for who she truly was. And in that moment, as the last light of the day faded into the night, Madeline knew that her life had changed forever. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to embrace it, whatever it held. With Ethan by her side, she knew she could face anything. Together, they had built a bond that went beyond the surface, a connection that neither status nor power could ever break. And for the first time, Madeline felt truly free. As the days passed, Madeline's connection with Ethan only deepened. She found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together, every conversation that flowed so naturally. In Ethan, she had found a kindred spirit, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not for the title she carried or the wealth she was born into. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. Madeline found herself laughing more than she had in years, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. It was as if the burden of her past had slowly begun to melt away. But even as she embraced this newfound sense of belonging, there was a part of her that still felt the weight of her reality. She wasn't just any woman. She was the daughter of a powerful alien empire, and that empire was never far from her mind. One evening, as the two of them sat on the small bench, outside the cafe, the night sky stretching above them in a sea of stars, Madeline found herself reflecting on everything she had left behind. Ethan, she began, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty, I've been thinking a lot about everything. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. What's on your mind? He asked, his tone gentle. Madeline hesitated, unsure of how to continue. I never thought I would be here, like this, she said, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I thought I had everything I needed. Power, wealth, respect. But none of that ever gave me what I have now. It's hard to explain. Ethan reached out, his hand gently covering hers. You don't have to explain it to me, he said, his voice steady and comforting. I just want you to be happy. Madeline felt a warmth spread through her at his words. He was so simple in his kindness, so unpretentious, and yet, it was that very simplicity that made her feel more understood than she ever had. She took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. I've spent my whole life being told what I should want, what I should be. But when I'm with you, Ethan, I don't feel like I'm pretending. I don't feel like I'm wearing a mask. Ethan smiled softly, his thumb gently rubbing her hand. You never need to pretend with me. I like you for who you are. Madeline's heart skipped a beat at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. She wasn't just a queen, or a princess, or the daughter of an empire. She was simply Madeline, a person who deserved love and kindness. But there's something I need to tell you, she continued, her voice wavering slightly. I'm not like other women. I come from a place far away, from a world you might not understand. Ethan's expression didn't change. He simply nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. It doesn't matter where you're from. What matters is who you are now. Madeline looked at him, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She had feared that revealing the truth about her past would drive him away, but instead, his words brought her comfort. You don't have to be afraid of my past, Ethan. It's not who I am anymore. Then that's all that matters, he said, his voice soft but certain. In that moment, Madeline realized that it wasn't her past that defined her, but the choices she made moving forward. And with Ethan, she could make a choice to live a life that was hers to shape, without the expectations or the chains of her heritage. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city fading around them, replaced by the quiet understanding between them. For the first time in a long time, Madeline felt a sense of peace. She didn't need to be the powerful queen of a far-off empire. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. All she needed was this moment, this connection with Ethan. And as she looked at him, his hand still gently holding hers, she realized that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life. One that was full of possibilities, full of hope. With Ethan by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next, knowing that she was finally free to be herself. As the weeks continued to pass, Madeline began to realize that she had changed in ways she never thought possible. The woman who had once walked through her life with the certainty of power and privilege now found herself walking with something far more valuable: peace. The life she had once believed was her destiny, filled with endless responsibilities and expectations, had begun to feel distant, like a world she no longer belonged to. She didn't need it anymore. What mattered now was this small corner of the universe she had found with Ethan. The cafe, the soft warmth of his smile, and the comfort of his presence had become her new reality. Each day, they would talk about everything and nothing. Ethan had an incredible ability to make the most mundane things feel important. They would sit in the cafe, watching the world outside pass by, while they shared stories, laughed, and simply enjoyed each other's company. It was something Madeline had never known before. For the first time, she felt like she was living in the present, not trapped by the weight of her past or the expectations of her future. But as much as she cherished these moments, a part of her still struggled with the looming question of what her future held. The more time she spent with Ethan, the more she realized that she wanted to stay. She wanted to build a life with him, free from the constraints of her royal background, free from the constant pressure of duty. But there was a part of her that feared the truth. She was still the daughter of an empire, and her past would never be fully erased. One evening, as they walked through the park together, the air crisp with the hint of fall, Madeline turned to Ethan, her heart pounding. "Ethan," she began, her voice unsure, "there's something I need to tell you." Ethan looked at her, his expression soft and patient. "What is it?" he asked, his hand brushing hers gently. Madeline hesitated, taking a deep breath. "I've been holding something back from you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not just anyone. I come from a family that rules over a vast empire. I've spent my whole life trying to escape it, trying to be something else, but—" She trailed off, unsure of how to continue. Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his gaze steady. "Madeline, I don't care about any of that," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "You're not your past. You're you. That's who I care about." Madeline's heart swelled at his words, but there was still a lingering doubt. "But what if my past comes back? What if I have to go back to that life?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan shook his head. "We'll face whatever comes, together. You're not alone anymore." Madeline looked into his eyes, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over her. For the first time, she realized that it didn't matter where she came from. What mattered was the choice she made now, in this moment. And the choice was clear. She chose Ethan. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible." Ethan smiled, his thumb gently brushing her cheek. "You don't have to thank me, Madeline. I'm just happy that you're here with me." In that moment, Madeline realized that the life she had once feared was no longer something that controlled her. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was hers to shape, alongside Ethan. And whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, as partners. The past, with all its power and expectations, no longer had a hold over her. It was a new beginning, a future full of possibility. And for the first time in her life, Madeline was truly free. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of happiness for Madeline and Ethan. They spent their days together, sharing everything from their hopes to their small, everyday thoughts. Madeline was no longer the queen of an alien empire. She was simply a woman who had found peace in the most unexpected of places. Ethan continued to work at the cafe, his usual cheerful demeanor lighting up the room every time he entered. Madeline, now a regular visitor, found solace in the simplicity of it all. There were no expectations, no grand responsibilities. Just two people finding joy in each other's company. But as much as she cherished these moments, Madeline knew that the world outside of this small cafe still existed. The truth of who she was, where she came from, lingered in the background. One day, as they sat together in the park, the weight of her thoughts grew heavier. Ethan had been talking about a new recipe he was experimenting with at the cafe, his voice light and carefree. Madeline listened, but her mind was far away. She had never expected to live like this, without the looming shadow of royalty, without the constant demands of her family. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something she couldn't escape forever. Ethan paused, noticing the change in her expression. "Hey, what's on your mind?" he asked, his voice soft. Madeline turned to him, her heart racing. She had never told him the full extent of her past, the full weight of what she had left behind. "Ethan, there's something I've been thinking about," she began, her voice trembling slightly. I'm not just someone who wanted to escape my past. I still feel like it's going to catch up with me." Ethan looked at her with concern, his hand gently taking hers. "Madeline, you don't have to carry that weight alone. Whatever comes, we'll deal with it together." Madeline met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes giving her a sense of reassurance. "But you don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My family, my title, it's a part of me that I can't just erase. And one day, they will come looking for me. I'll have to return to that life." Ethan shook his head. "You don't have to go back to anything you don't want to. You've already made your choice. And that's the only thing that matters." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply within Madeline. She had made her choice. She had chosen this life, this future with him, away from the empire she had once ruled. It wasn't the life she had expected, but it was the life she had found for herself. "I just don't want to lose this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose you." Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand. "You won't lose me, Madeline. I'm right here. And as long as you want me here, I'll stay." For the first time in a long time, Madeline felt the weight of her past lifting. Ethan's words were like a lifeline, pulling her away from the shadows that had once haunted her. She realized, in that moment, that the future she had once feared was no longer something to dread. It was something she could shape, alongside Ethan. As they sat together in the park, the world around them seemed to fade away. Madeline no longer felt the need to carry the burden of her past. She had made a choice, and with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. She didn't need to be the queen of a vast empire. She didn't need to be anyone other than the woman sitting beside him, sharing this simple, beautiful moment. And for the first time, she was content. She knew that whatever the future held, it was hers to choose. As Madeline walked through the park beside Ethan, a gentle breeze ruffling the leaves overhead, she couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had spent so many years running from her past, from the weight of her responsibilities and the expectations placed on her. But now, with Ethan by her side, she felt free. Free from the chains of her royal lineage and the life she had once known. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Madeline glanced at him, a curious smile playing on her lips. "About what?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for a moment before responding, his tone thoughtful. "About the future. About what comes next for us." Madeline's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on the present, on building a life with him, that she hadn't really considered the long term. But as she looked at Ethan, she realized that he was right. There was a future to think about, a future they could shape together. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I want to make this work, Madeline. I want to build a life with you. And I want us to be happy, no matter where we are or what we have." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that resonated deep within Madeline. She had never imagined a future like this, A future filled with love and partnership, without the pressures of royalty or empire. I want that too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want us to have a life together, one where we're free to just be who we are. Ethan smiled at her, his eyes full of warmth and sincerity. Then that's what we'll have, he said, taking her hand in his. We'll make it work, no matter what. Madeline felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest as she squeezed his hand. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly home. I never thought I would find this, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I never thought I would find someone like you. Ethan's smile widened, and he leaned in to kiss her forehead gently. You don't have to thank me, he said softly. I'm just happy to be here with you. They continued walking, the sun beginning to set behind them, casting a golden glow over the park. As they strolled along the path, Madeline couldn't help but feel a deep sense of contentment. She had once been a queen, a ruler of vast star systems, but none of that mattered anymore. All that mattered now was the life she was building with Ethan, the simple, beautiful life they would create together. It was a life that didn't require titles or power, just love and understanding. For the first time, Madeline felt like she could finally breathe, free from the weight of her past. And with Ethan by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand, ready to build a future of their own choosing. As the months passed, Madeline and Ethan continued to build a life together, one filled with the quiet joys of everyday moments. Their relationship blossomed in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. What had started as a simple connection over shared cups of cocoa and honest conversation had grown into something deeper, more profound. They spent their days enjoying each other's company, learning from one another, and navigating the ups and downs of life as a couple. Madeline had never imagined this kind of happiness. Life without the weight of her royal title, without the expectations and responsibilities that had once defined her. She had never known it could be so simple. One day, as they sat in the cafe, a familiar figure entered. It was Pax, the butler who had once served her family. He was dressed in his usual formal attire, his forearms moving with the grace that only someone of his kind could manage. He approached their table, his expression stoic. Madeline's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him. Madeline, Pax said, his voice respectful but with a hint of concern, your presence is requested by your family. Ethan's hand, which had been resting on the table, tightened around hers. Madeline met Pax's gaze, her mind racing. The reminder of her past was like a cold breeze sweeping through the warmth she had found with Ethan. I see, she said softly, her voice betraying none of the emotions that churned inside her. Tell them I am not coming. Pax's eyes flickered, his expression unreadable. Madeline, they will not take no for an answer. The Empire demands your return. Madeline's heart sank, but she didn't let the fear show. Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowing with concern. You don't have to go back, he said firmly. Whatever they want, whatever they expect from you, it doesn't have to control you anymore. Madeline squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. I know, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. But it's not that simple. They are my family, and there are things I can't ignore. I need to go, at least for a little while. Ethan's face softened with understanding. I won't stop you, Madeline, but I'll be here, waiting for you, whenever you're ready to come back. She smiled at him, her heart filled with both love and a tinge of sadness. Thank you, she whispered. The decision weighed heavily on her heart as she left the cafe and followed Pax to the waiting transport. The journey back to her family's domain felt like a lifetime. When she arrived, her family was waiting for her, as regal and imposing as ever. Her father, the Emperor, stood at the forefront, his gaze sharp and calculating. Madeline, he said, his voice cold but with a hint of affection, you have kept us waiting long enough. Madeline stood tall, her back straight as she faced him. I'm here, father. What is it that you want from me? The Emperor studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Your position as heir is being threatened. The time has come for you to take your rightful place. There are matters that cannot be ignored, and we need you to lead. Madeline felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had known this day would come, but it didn't make it any easier. She had built a life with Ethan, a life that didn't involve the weight of an empire. But standing here, With her father's piercing gaze upon her, she felt the pressure of her legacy pushing down on her. "I cannot return to that life," she said, her voice steady but resolute. "I have chosen a different path." The emperor's expression darkened. "You think you can escape your duty, Madeline? You think you can walk away from your destiny?" Madeline met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes," she replied. "I found something more important than power. I found a life that is mine to choose, not one imposed upon me." The silence that followed was heavy. Her family had always expected her to comply, to follow the path laid out for her. But for the first time, Madeline realized that she was no longer afraid. She had made her choice, and she would live with it, whatever the consequences. "I won't return," she said firmly. "I have a life to live, and it's not in this palace. I've chosen my own future, one that does not require a throne." The emperor studied her for a long moment before finally speaking. "So be it," he said coldly. "But know this, Madeline, you will never be free of us. The empire will always be watching." Madeline took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I'm not afraid," she said quietly. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the past behind her. When she returned to Ethan, she knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, she felt free. The empire might still loom in the distance, but it no longer had a hold on her. She had chosen her future, and she would face it with Ethan by her side.